Okay, any other questions? All right, let's move on to the next topic. Jonathan Crow is going to give us a briefing on development process and funding.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Crow, and I'm a principal planner with the department, and it's a pleasure to be here before this committee. Catherine asked me to put together a brief presentation on some very large topics, so I'm going to give you a very high level and overview of subjects, these complicated issues, and hoping to give you kind of an introduction to some of these subjects. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about how Pima County plans for growth and development from a transportation perspective. Next slide, please. Today I'm going to briefly discuss how Pima County guides land use development and the transportation system that is needed to serve that development. I'll discuss the comprehensive plan, the major streets plan, and the concurrency policy. Then I'll briefly summarize how we review proposed development plans and analyze traffic impacts. And at last, I'll talk a little bit about roadway development impact fees and their limitations to funding needed roadway improvements. Next slide. So like all cities and counties, Pima County plans for growth with a comprehensive plan, in our case called Pima Prospers. This 10-year plan guides future land use decisions by establishing land use types and intensities that support economic development while, in our case, protecting conservation lands. We're getting close to renewing and updating our Pima Prospers comprehensive plan in the next year or two, so we'll have another chance to take a look at these land use intensities, review development over the last 10 years, and plan for growth over the next 10 years. So it's really kind of the overarching guiding document for how the county as a whole plans for growth and development, and transportation is just one part of that in a comprehensive plan and element within a comprehensive plan. Next slide. Pima Prospers also identifies what they call three focused development areas in the southwest area, Flowing Wells area, and in the southeast. And in those particular areas, the comprehensive plan encourages mixed uses and urban developments to make travel more efficient and support walking, biking, and transit trips. These areas also promote public and private investment to support the infrastructure expansion that is needed to coordinate with this development activity. Next slide, please. So Pima County also has a concurrency policy, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. The concurrency policy is established to ensure that adequate roadway infrastructure exists when we're creating new development projects, rezonings, projects that are coming up, types of infrastructure, but I'm just going to speak about policy interpretation and walk you through the three different categories that we have in the books. If a project that comes in for review significantly impacts roadway capacity and there's no mitigation provided, then the staff may recommend denial of that project as it goes to, say, the Planning and Zoning Commission and ultimately the Board of Supervisors. That's what we would call a primary. If a project may also significantly impact roadway capacity, but the developer is proposing some type of mitigation to offset those impacts. In other cases, a project may be located within an infill area or one of the designated growth areas that I spoke about in the previous conservation land system. So that project may be achieving and supporting other goals that the county has for growth and development, and for that reason, staff would typically recommend approval. But sometimes that means that the impacted roadways adjacent to that project become more congested. And this is where it's challenging to ensure that adequate roadway capacity exists. And part of that's been a legacy of not having been able to keep up with growth and development in this region for dozens of years, where we have unmet needs, unfunded needs, roadways that are at or over capacity that we just have not been able to fund and keep up with. So it's not necessarily a problem specific to the projects that are coming today. It's a legacy of our growth and development over the last 50 years and our ability or lack thereof to keep up with growth and development. And then the last category is small projects that have only a minor impacts, and obviously staff typically recommends approval for those projects. So that's our concurrency policy. Next slide, please. Plan. We also have a major streets plan, and this plan designates major streets and the necessary roadway rights-of-way that are needed to accommodate future growth. This plan allows the county to request right-of-way dedications from developers for future roadway improvements, but it's important to those developments not to build out early improvement, require those developments to build out those improvements. So you may have a development that's along a road that has a future designation of 150 feet, and that could accommodate, say, a 4 or 5 lane divided arterial roadway. If it's a small project that's coming in to build out a 4 or 5 lane divided arterial if it's a 2 lane road now. But what we will do is request and require that they dedicate the necessary right-of-way adjacent to their project so that we don't preclude being able to expand that roadway when the funding is available and when the county is ready to make those improvements. So the plan doesn't establish when roads are being widened, but it does establish the future right-of-way designations, and it's simply a mechanism for obtaining those rights-of-way during the development review process. Next slide, please. So traffic studies are one of the key methods that we use to evaluate traffic impacts from new developments. These studies are required to document existing and future conditions with and without any proposed projects. These studies identify where off-site roadway improvements may be required to serve the development and mitigate impacts to the adjacent roadway system. The Transportation Department delegates the responsibility for reviewing these traffic studies and proposed developments to the Development Services Department, and we coordinate with them on these reviews and on the recommendations that go forward towards the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit now about roadway impact fees. So roadway impact fees are one small source of transportation funding. They help require needed or new development. They can't fund maintenance, but or address existing capacity needs, but they can be used to fund roadway capacity that's needed by new development. Our roadway impact fee plan is now a 10-year plan and a program with 28 projects in 7 service areas throughout Pima County. The estimated cost, $20 projects, is just over $200 million in 2020 dollars, and we'll be updating this plan again by the year 2025. And again, it's important to stress that these funds can only be used to fund the capacity needed for new development, and they cannot be used to fund the existing capacity deficiencies that exist today as a result of past developments. The state statutes have been updated and changed over the years, and they've become very narrow in what they allow the impact fees to be used for and what they can't be used for. So sometimes people think that, let's just use our impact fees to pay for, any deficiency you might see out there or any roadway improvements that might be needed, but that they're not allowed to do so. We have to just collect the fees as the development comes in over time, and then after a period of years, when we collect enough fees from development, we can then use those funds to help improve a roadway that may have been needed to be provided for that development. So it's kind of a lagging mechanism to improve roads, and it doesn't really help us get out ahead of development or to put in the type of roadway improvements that are needed as the development is coming in. It's kind of a later, after the fact kind of a way of funding roadway improvements. And typically, we'll use a variety of funding, at least in the past, to fund roadway improvements. So impact fees are just one piece of the puzzle. It may be federal dollars, it may be RTA money, it may be state HURF, it may be grant funds, but Roadway fees definitely contribute, but they are only one piece of the funding puzzle. I've got one more slide here, if we can move on to the next one. So this is an example, a map of the southwest area, and it's just an example of current and planned rezonings in the southwest area along the Valencia Road corridor, which runs east to west across the middle of that map. For the last 20 years, this area has grown considerably, mostly within the Star Valley development area, which is kind of in the middle area of this map. But there are more than a dozen other subdivisions and projects that have been approved and are continuing to build out, which is putting pressure on Valencia Road and some of the other roads in this area. The rezoning conditions that have been placed on these developments and other off-site improvements alone have not and will not address existing and future deficiencies on the roads in this area. They will help mitigate some of the immediate adjacent impacts to these developments, but if you look at just the cumulative projected impacts of, say, these developments shown here in yellow, the projected traffic on Valencia far exceeds its current capacity over the next 20 years. So to help kind of guide future policy decisions, the department has just initiated a year-long Southwest Area Transportation Study. And we're going to be evaluating all the pending and planned developments in this area to determine what long-term transportation needs are for the area. Impact fees are anticipated to help fund some of these improvements, but not all, and additional roadway capacity and operational improvements are going to be needed. So this study will help us determine what our best strategy is moving forward, including both supply and demand solutions. I think that's my last slide. It concludes my presentation, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. It's a lot of information and kind of move through it pretty quickly, so.
Yes, Tom McGovern has a question.
Jonathan, I think I heard you right, but it's a nuance I wasn't really aware of. Say, for example, I decide to develop some property along a two-lane road, and the traffic study shows that in today's condition, it needs to be 4-lane. After my development is completed, it still needs only 4 lanes. Did I understand you to say that you can't exact impact fees for that situation?
No, I didn't quite say that, Tom, and it's complicated, but I'll try to parse it out. So if a development comes in on any particular roadway where it's 2 lanes now, but that roadway is currently showing its overcapacity and it's showing the need for 4 lanes, on the one hand, just to start with, we are not necessarily in a position to recommend denial for that project. And I don't want to get in too much into the legal, aspects of development rights and what entitlements, private developers have. But essentially, what we can do is, if it's a situation which is sort of as black and white as you've described, we're gonna make that comment in our report to the board or the Planning and Zoning Commission and say, hey, we've got a problem area out here, and this development is coming in. It depends a little bit on so many factors. So if it's a small project that's only putting out, a few hundred or even a few thousand ADT, that's going to be kind of a marginal impact on the current conditions. It's not that it's minor, but it's relative to the size. So we have that on projects along, say, Thornydale Road or Valencia Road, where there are smallish projects that are coming in that are adding just an incremental amount of traffic to what's already sort of congested. In those situations, I think the best we can do is look towards immediate off-site improvements that are going to help traffic flow. We might be able to tweak some intersect traffic signals, a turn lane here and there, adjust traffic signal timing, and those kind of things. But if it's a small project, they don't really have the financial capacity, frankly, to do much more than those types of minimal off-site improvements. Where it gets more complicated is if it's a large project that's coming in and the roadway adjacent to them is already posed, at or to put in, a lot more traffic. Those are the ones that get contentious and are really hard to struggle through. In some cases, that particular arterial road might be in our impact fee plan. And Valencia Road is an example of that, where A portion of Valencia Road is in our impact fee plan, and so any projects they're coming online will be paying impact fees that will go ostensibly to those future roadway improvements when we're able to do them. But it's not always the case, and I think this is part of the challenge with the state statutes that changed in 2018 that kind of made things a lot more limited for counties to be able to use those funds and kind of eliminate a lot of the flexibility that we had to apply those funds where we felt them most needed. So there's going to be cases where a project will be coming in, that particular roadway is at capacity or over capacity, but it's not in the impact fee plan because it's already over congested or congested, and there's not a lot of new development that's coming on to that roadway. It may have been results of 20 years of past developments, and we can't use the current impact fees to pay for past needs. We can only use them towards future needs. So it really makes things challenging for us, I guess, is the bottom line, and we do the best we can, but in some cases those ultimately, in some cases they can't. So
Yeah, I know the concept seems simple. Development pays for itself, essentially, is the shorthand for it, but it's way more complicated. Thanks for that explanation. That was great.
Sure.
Chair Verper?
Yes, Latricia? You have a question, Latricia Free?
I do. Can
Go
you guys
ahead.
hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I had a question. How does a resident know whether or not impact fees are going to be utilized in their area?
Our website has all the information about impact fees, so if you go to our those projects that the impact fee program is going to be used for. So that's probably the easiest way. If they have trouble navigating our website, they can call us and we can help them identify those projects.
Okay, so in that way, if a citizen sees the use of impact fees in their area, I assume it's not an easy thing for those to be format that you guys are utilizing?
You're correct, and I didn't explain that, but that's one of the aspects about the program is that those fees are collected within the 7 benefit areas of the county, and they must be used within the northwest side. Paying in impact fees is not paying for a project that's going to be built out in Vail. They'll be used for projects that are close to and within the benefit area that they're collected.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Tom Bresney?
Thanks, Chair Verber. Jonathan, thanks for the briefing. Quick question in back when you were explaining Tom McGovern's question.
Mm-hmm.
Can impact fees be used for like signaling upgrades? Let's say we have a development going in, and this is a true case in the Green Valley area. It's going to come to an intersection that has a 3-way stop right now.
Mm-hmm.
So with the increased traffic coming out of that subdivision, maybe an impact fee could be used for signaling or something like that?
Yeah, if it's improving the capacity and operations of that traffic, it can be used.
Okay.
Yeah, theoretically. Now, it doesn't mean that every signal or intersection improvement that we're going to be doing is going to be eligible for impact fees. They have to be a 10-year program. So if it's a new project or a new intersection that's come about, if it's in the program already listed as an eligible project, it can be. If it's not, then it can't be, and we'll have to revisit that when we update the program in 2025.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Yes, Albert, you had a question?
Yeah, John, just a general question about rezoning applications. Do they, when they're considering a rezoning, do they look at other issues other than traffic, like environmental or native species and stuff like that?
Absolutely, and I only was focusing on the transportation aspects of development for rezoning. They have to put together a whole site analysis to you name it, and those reports are provided. But again, we're reviewing just the transportation and traffic aspects in our department, but the Development Services Department and the other departments in the county review all those other components as well.
Now, another general question, do you know of any rezoning applications that have ever been denied for traffic issues? or any kind of issue?
I can't think of one. I know there have been projects that have been recommended for denial, up to the board level. But I can't think of one in particular in my history where the board has voted denial for a project just solely based on traffic impacts. And I think the issue there is that it gets into the weeds with the legality of what development rights the property owners might have, and to what extent the argument that the county might be using to vote against it holds up in the court of law. But I can't think of one that's actually been denied. There have been projects that have gone to the Planning and Zoning Commission that have been recommended for denial, but usually by the time they then get forwarded to the board, there's a lot of work that happens between that time frame and some other mitigations a little easier to put forward at that point.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Sure.
Excellent. Any other questions before we move on? Jonathan, thank you for the excellent and insightful presentation. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Okay, we're going to move on to the committee membership. Some comments on that. First off, I think we want to share a sincere thank you to Albert for his years of service on the committee. This is literally a community service endeavor for all these members. And I can remember first getting on the committee and how active you've been, and over the years, your contributions. So thank you very much for your time and efforts. Much appreciated. We do have 3 other vacancies. So the vacancy name in process, but there are 3 other vacancies, and hence impact on our quorum. So here, who are on the committee, since that's part of our current situation. I wanted to thank all of you personally for all your time, particularly those serving on more than one committee like Tom McGovern. It takes a lot of time to be on these committees because you're preparing, you're participating, and you're following up. So thank you I know that sort of thing. It takes time. So thank you all very, very for this. For all of us, it makes our jobs easier. So on the next topic, though, topics for future discussion, are there any from the committee? I do have one I wanted to put out there. Tom?
I do, thanks.
Chair Verberg?
Yes, and Lucretia.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I interrupt somebody who was already in the process of
Yes,
talking?
it's good with you. You have a lot of interest here. Go ahead.
It's your District 4 seat mate, Lucretia. One thing that has happened in District 4 recently is a discussion on some of our neighborhoods that have private roads and over to a county-maintained road. So I'd like to see a briefing in the future on how that process works. I think with then another one with the new PCI ratings coming out, it might behoove us to stay at the sub-area as we go forward. And I will defer the rest of my time to my District 4 seatmate.
Okay, those are 2 good ones. Lucretia's free, please. You had something? Lucretia, are you with us?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's hard to hear exactly what you guys are saying, so I apologize. So I had 2 future I wanted to ask about for future meeting. One of those just was our meeting schedule. We're kind of on a obviously the committee has served as a significant role in the pivotal role in the past. Roads are repaired, et cetera. Now that has been established and it's more routine, I'm just asking the question, not taking a position today, whether or not we every other month or once a quarter, if that would be enough. It's just a question for discussion.
Excellent, and point well made, which leads really nicely into my comments. So we have 3 suggestions already. Really think we need to be taking a look at what we're going to be doing in this coming year or two. Sort of a future look and a discussion in the January meeting of these sorts of topics and where are we going to go. I'll use the last few months as an example. We're sort of on autopilot. We don't have any community input anymore, or very little. Now that's really good. That's what we really want, because what does that tell us? It means we're making great progress on the roads. That's what we're hearing from all the, Risha was chair, and we'd have to spend an hour hearing from residents, one after the other. We don't have that now, and it's a big signal for us of the huge progress that's being made. But what are we going to do when all these roads we can continue to get forth? And hopefully we can continue to get some PAYGO money, because that's what's been making the big difference over the last year or two. But lacking that, where do we get funding? Are we going to be back where we're at, or where we were, I should say, back 3 or 4 roads up? We'll be back in the same situation in another 8 years, like 9 years. So one thing I would mention, but one thing is we should be checking out future sources. We'll use a good example. I think Tom has brought this up more than we have. There are other states that have particular fees for vehicles that are electric and gas combined, an extra fee for them. And what about those that are just all electric? For those of you who haven't read the analysis and research on these new electric vehicles, I mean, my 2 daughters have. Why is that? They have extra torque that the all-gas engines don't have. And a lot of people have heavy feet. And guess what? They're replacing a lot of tires sooner as a result. But what does that mean? It means wear on our roads. So wouldn't that be, if we look at a good analysis, something we could process and think about on this committee, and maybe make a recommendation to the board, and maybe on from there. So obviously we have more than several items we can consider for this coming year, including re-implementing the subcommittee to deal with the PCI information and what that may tell us. So we've got some substantive things in front of us. I would like to suggest that we use a good bulk of the January meeting to talk these through and see what we think is funding is key, because we'll do a great job. We get the roads up to shape. We get RTA in motion, and they're doing good things. But then the roads start, the condition starts going down, and we're right back where we were. So we need the next 5 thinking years. We've got, anyway, so we'd like to have, I think, based on the input, probably focused on what we think are the items we should focus on. And there's a technique that I'd like to suggest. Let's say we get a half dozen items. I'm going to suggest that the committee literally rank them. And we figure out in the ranking, averaging the ranking, what are the top items, and work on those. If we have 6, we focus on those, we will have done something good, I think, for going forward over the next year or two. So I see a lot of nods of the heads, and so let's plan on that. We already have several here. We're going to put them up. We're going to get people to vote on them. Maybe not in January. Maybe we'll give it some thought and vote on them in February and average the votes, and we'll go from there.
Chair Verberg?
Yes.
I wonder if there is a way to solicit input from the public as we ponder our focus in 2023.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe what we do is we come up with these priorities, let's just say 1 through 6, and then we ask for public input on them. We listen to the public and we make amendments to them.
Yes.
That'd be perfect. Because that's in keeping with basically the mission and I think the bylaws of the committee. So good suggestion. Anything else?